In Silicon Valley, there's a number that changes everything. $1 billion. Cross that threshold and you're no longer just a startup. You're a unicorn, a myth made real. But here's what they don't tell you about unicorns. Most of them shouldn't exist at all. This is the story of what really happens behind the billion-dollar curtain. The secret playbook that insiders use. The manipulation, the casualties, and the people who got filthy rich while everything burned around them. What you're about to hear has been carefully hidden from the public. Until now. Right now, as you're watching this, there are over 1,200 companies in the world valued at more than $1 billion. Unicorns. They're everywhere. The apps on your phone, the services you use daily, the companies making headlines every single week. But here's the secret that nobody wants you to know. Most of these billion-dollar valuations are complete fiction. They're not based on profit, not based on revenue, not even based on a realistic path to ever making money. They're based on a story, a carefully crafted narrative designed to extract money from investors who should know better, but choose not to ask the hard questions. And if you can tell the right story to the right people at the right time, you can manufacture a billion-dollar company out of absolutely nothing. Out of smoke and mirrors and PowerPoint presentations. You've heard about the spectacular failures. Theranos, which was valued at $9 billion before everyone discovered the technology didn't work. WeWork, which tried to go public at $47 billion and collapsed to less than 10. FTX, a $32 billion cryptocurrency exchange that turned out to be running a massive fraud. But these weren't anomalies. They weren't outliers. They were just the ones that got caught. For every house of cards that collapses in spectacular fashion, 10 more are being built on the exact same foundation. And everyone in Silicon Valley knows it. The founders know it. The investors know it. The employees suspect it. And they all keep playing the game anyway. So why does it keep happening? To understand that, you need to understand how venture capital actually works. And it's nothing like what you think. Venture capital isn't about building sustainable businesses anymore. It hasn't been for decades. It's about creating a game of hot potato where everyone's trying to pass the company to the next investor at a higher valuation. And nobody wants to be the one holding it when everyone realizes it's worthless. Here's how the game works. An investor puts $10 million into a startup at a $100 million valuation. They own 10%. 6 months later, the startup raises another round at a $200 million valuation. On paper, that investor's stake is now worth $20 million. They've doubled their money. Except they haven't actually made any money yet. It's all on paper. All theoretical. The only way they actually make money is if someone else buys their shares at that higher price, either in another funding round, or when the company goes public, or when it gets acquired. Until then, it's just numbers in a spreadsheet. But those numbers are enough to raise the next fund, to attract more investors, to keep the machine running. And here's the really dark part. Venture capitalists don't need most of their companies to succeed. They know 90% will fail. They're counting on it. Because they're diversified, they invest in hundreds of companies. They only need 1 or 2 massive wins to generate astronomical returns that make up for all the losses. It's a game where the house always wins. The investors win even when companies fail. But the employees betting everything on one company, they're the ones who lose. And we'll get to them in a moment. So how do you actually turn an idea into a billion-dollar valuation when you're losing millions of dollars every single month? There's a formula, a playbook that's been refined over decades. And once you know it, you'll see it everywhere. Step 1. Redefine your market. You never say you're disrupting a small industry. Everything has to be a multi-trillion-dollar market. This isn't exaggeration, it's strategic framing. Selling software to restaurants. You're not in the restaurant software business. You're revolutionizing the $3.2 trillion food service industry with AI-driven optimization and predictive analytics. Selling mattresses online? You're not selling mattresses. You're transforming the $450 billion sleep wellness and recovery industry. Notice the difference? This isn't lying, technically. It's showing investors the biggest possible version of what you could theoretically become if everything goes perfectly. Which it won't. But that doesn't matter for the pitch. Step 2. Craft the founder narrative. This is absolutely crucial. Investors don't just invest in companies. They invest in stories. They invest in myths. They want to believe they're getting in early on the next Steve Jobs, the next Jeff Bezos, the next Elon Musk. So you need a narrative that makes you feel inevitable. Dropped out of Stanford to pursue your vision? Perfect. That's the jobs narrative. Immigrant who overcame impossible odds? Even better. That's the American dream story. Failed 3 times before this? That's the persistence and learning narrative. Every failure was just preparation for this moment. The story is often more important than the actual product, because investors aren't really betting on your product working. They're betting on whether you can convince the next investor that you're special, that you have that indefinable quality that separates winners from losers. Step 3. And this is where everything gets dangerous. Manufactured growth at any cost. Hockey stick growth. That's the term they use when a company's user numbers shoot up almost vertically on a graph. It looks incredible in a pitch deck. It looks like you've achieved product market fit, like you've found something people desperately want, and the only thing holding you back is capital to scale. There's just one problem. In most cases, this growth is completely artificial, deliberately manufactured, unsustainable by design. Companies spend millions on advertising to acquire customers who will never be profitable. They subsidize their products so heavily that they're essentially paying people to use them. The unit economics don't work. They've never worked. They were never designed to work. But the growth chart looks beautiful, and that's what matters for raising the next round of funding. This strategy has a name in Silicon Valley. They call it growth at all costs. And despite the name making it sound reckless, it's not a bug in the system. It's not an unfortunate side effect. It is the system. It is the entire business model. The strategy is simple. Raise enough money, grow fast enough, get big enough that you either go public and let the stock market deal with the problems, or you get acquired by a bigger company before the money runs out and reality sets in. It's financial musical chairs. Everyone's dancing, the music is playing, and everyone's desperately hoping they're not the one left standing when it stops. But here's what they don't show you in those IPO celebration videos. What happens to everyone else? Someone pays for all of this. And it's almost never the founders or the investors. They have golden parachutes, diversified portfolios, exit strategies built into their contracts. The people who pay are the employees, the believers, the ones who thought they were building something real. In a typical unicorn that fails, the top 5 people might walk away with $50 million combined. The next 100 employees get nothing. Zero. Their equity is worth less than the paper it's printed on. But it's not just about the money. The psychological cost is deeper than that. The rates of anxiety and depression among startup employees are significantly higher than the general population. The pressure is relentless. The hours are brutal. The culture glorifies suffering. They call it hustling. They call it grinding. They make it sound noble. But the truth is simpler. It's exploitation dressed up as opportunity. And the people being exploited are often the ones who can least afford it. Recent graduates with student loans. People from working-class backgrounds trying to break into tech. Immigrants on work visas who can't afford to lose their jobs. They're sold a dream. And for 90% of them, it turns into a nightmare. The system is starting to crack. You can see it if you know where to look. The warning signs are everywhere. In the past 3 years, over $200 billion in startup valuation has simply vanished. Companies that were worth $5 billion are now worth $500 million. Some are worth nothing at all. Layoffs have hit the tech industry harder than at any point since the dot-com crash of 2000. Over 400,000 tech workers have lost their jobs. Many of them were at companies that were supposed to be the future, that were supposed to change the world. The IPO market, which was supposed to be the exit for all these unicorns, has frozen solid. Companies that were planning to go public are canceling their plans. Because when you go public, you have to show real numbers, real revenue, real profit, or at least a path to profit. And most of these companies don't have that. Even the venture capitalists are getting nervous. Fundraising is down. The easy money from the last decade is drying up. Interest rates are higher, which means investors actually expect returns now instead of just betting on infinite growth. So what happens next? Some believe we're heading for a reckoning that will reshape Silicon Valley forever. A crash that will force the industry to return to fundamentals. To building real businesses that serve real needs and make real money. But others aren't so sure. They've seen this before. The dot-com bust in 2000, the financial crisis in 2008. Each time, people said the industry would change, would learn its lesson, would stop chasing growth at any cost. And each time, after a few years of caution, the machine roared back to life, bigger than before, more aggressive than before. Because the incentives haven't changed. The people at the top still make fortunes whether companies succeed or fail. The game is designed this way. Venture capitalists raise funds from pension plans and university endowments. They invest that money in startups. They take a 2% management fee every year just for managing the money, plus 20% of any profits. So even if 90% of their investments fail, they've already made millions in management fees. And if even one or two succeed, they make tens of millions more in carry. They cannot lose. The system is designed so they cannot lose. Meanwhile, the employees who believed in the mission, who worked the 80-hour weeks, who sacrificed everything, they're the ones holding the bag when it all falls apart. The music is still playing, but it's getting slower. The chairs are disappearing, and there are more players than ever before. Because here's the thing about the unicorn game. It doesn't matter how many times it crashes. As long as there are young people who believe they can be the next Mark Zuckerberg, as long as there are investors with money to deploy, as long as there are business magazines celebrating disruption and innovation, the game will continue. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the creative destruction is worth it. Maybe the one company out of 100 that actually succeeds and changes the world makes up for the 99 that fail and destroy lives in the process. But what nobody talks about is this. We don't get to choose which one we are. The founders who failed worked just as hard as the ones who succeeded. The employees who got nothing sacrificed just as much as the ones who got rich. The difference often comes down to timing, luck, and being willing to bend the truth at exactly the right moment. So, if you're thinking about joining a unicorn startup, here's what you need to know. Don't believe the valuation. It's almost certainly inflated. Don't count on your equity. It's probably worth nothing. Don't sacrifice your health, your relationships, your mental well-being for a company that will replace you in a week if you burn out. And if you're thinking about investing in the next unicorn, ask yourself this: are you okay with being part of a system that enriches a handful of people while leaving thousands holding worthless paper and broken promises? 1,200 companies valued at over $1 billion each. $3.8 trillion. More than the GDP of every country except the United States and China. 73%. Let that sink in. Nearly 3/4 of all billion-dollar companies have never made money. And yet, the game continues. The question is, will you be left standing when it stops?